Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're cracking open a historical case file to solve a foundational mystery. Where did ancient Israel's courts actually come from? And what we're going to find is that there isn't just one simple answer. Nope. There are three competing stories, and each one has its own agenda.
So just imagine this challenge for a second. You're leading hundreds of thousands of people, you're wandering through the desert, you have no courthouses, no law schools, no established procedures at all. How in the world do you make sure justice is actually done? Well, that was the exact massive problem facing the early Israelites.
You see, the whole story starts with a single point of failure. I mean, Moses was the Supreme Court, the small claims court, the whole shebang. The demand was so huge that people would literally stand in line from morning until evening just to get their case heard. It was just completely unsustainable. No way that could last.
All right, so clearly something had to give. And the first version of how that change happened, well, it comes from a pretty unexpected source, an outsider with a brilliant, totally practical idea.
So, enter Jethro, Moses' father-in-law, the priest of Midian. He shows up, takes one look at this absolute chaos, and basically says, whoa, 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 what you are doing is not good. He can see his son-in-law is on the fast track to a total burnout, so he decides to step in. And Jethro's plan? Honestly, it sounds like it's straight out of a modern management textbook. It's a classic pyramid structure, right? Find good, trustworthy people, create a clear chain of command, leaders of thousands, hundreds, fifties, tens. And then delegate. Let them handle the small stuff, and you, Moses, you just act as the final court of appeals for the really gnarly cases. Simple, smart, effective. Okay, so that seems like a neat and tidy solution, doesn't it? But that's not the only version of the story we have. Not by a long shot. The Bible actually preserves another account, and this one, it paints a very, very different picture of where this whole revolutionary idea came from. So let's jump ahead to the book of Deuteronomy. The story gets retold, and on the surface, it sounds pretty similar. Moses is overwhelmed, a new system of judges is needed, all that stuff. But as you listen closely, you start to realize, wait a minute, someone's missing. A key character from that first version is just gone. And here is the central conflict, laid out plain and simple. In this second telling, the idea doesn't come from Jethro, the foreign father-in-law. No, it comes directly from Moses himself. And the reason given isn't just Moses' burnout, it's the nation's massive population growth that's making the old system impossible. You see the shift? The focus goes from practical foreign efficiency to pure homegrown Israelite authority. And you gotta ask, was this just an accident? Well, probably not. The biblical scholar Bernard Levinson argues that Jethro was intentionally written out of this version. He says Jethro was airbrushed out, as if to sanitize the story and get rid of any hint that Israel's amazing justice system might have, foreign roots. Jethro's brilliant idea gets completely absorbed by the character of Moses. And it's not just about who came up with the idea. Instead of all that talk about logistics and management, the Deuteronomy version adds this incredibly powerful ethical and theological layer. Moses gives the new judges this solemn charge to be impartial, to treat everyone the same, the rich, the poor, because, and this is the absolute core of it, justice is of God. This isn't just about efficiency anymore, it's a profound statement about the very nature of law. Okay, let's take a breath. So we have two totally conflicting origin stories. One is this pragmatic plan from an outsider. The other is a deeply ideological one that comes from within. You'd think that's complicated enough, right? Well, it gets even more complex. Because the book of Numbers throws in a third, really mysterious clue that might just be another piece of this whole puzzle. Yeah, this third account is way more ambiguous. It talks about Moses appointing 70 elders to help him carry his heavy burden. But here's the thing, it never actually calls them a judiciary or a court. Instead, they get a piece of his prophetic spirit. So scholars are left wondering, is this a third, totally separate tradition where legal authority was seen as coming from prophetic power, not just administrative skill? So even though it doesn't talk about lawsuits or court cases, the details here are super intriguing. You've got these 70 elders sharing Moses' prophetic authority. And get this, his father-in-law is actually there, but he's not giving advice. He's acting as a wilderness guide. The focus is all on spiritual leadership. But you have to remember, in the ancient world, that line between getting a divine message and delivering a divine judgment, it was pretty blurry. So this could totally represent a tradition where justice was seen as flowing directly from divine inspiration. Okay, to really wrap our heads around all this, we gotta look at the actual words being used. These Hebrew terms pop up across all three accounts, and what they mean is pretty revealing. You've got the zakenim, the elders, which points to a traditional system, based on community respect. Then there are the shoterim, the officials or scribes, which hints at a more formal, bureaucratic system with written records. And finally, the sarim, those are the officers or heads from Jethro's pyramid scheme. The way these roles seem to overlap and change in each story gives us clues about all the different kinds of structures that were probably floating around.
All right, so we have three different accounts. Different characters, different motivations, different details. I mean, what are we supposed to make of all this? Why does it even matter that there isn't one single clear-cut story?
Because this is probably the most important takeaway of all. These conflicting stories, they aren't a mistake. They're not a bug in the system. They are a feature. Instead of trying to smooth them over or pick one true version, scholars now see them as incredible windows into the complex, messy history of ancient Israel. Right, because each story reveals something different. That shift from Exodus to Deuteronomy, it suggests a nation's identity is changing, it's evolving, maybe moving from being open to foreign ideas to a later time that's all about national pride and theological depth. And the fact that we have three versions, that probably means different communities, maybe different tribes or groups, had their own origin stories, and they were all seen as important enough to preserve. But here's the amazing part. Through all the differences, one core principle is always there: the absolute, critical need for justice that is fair, accessible to everyone, and ultimately rooted in the divine. So, which story is the true one? Which one actually happened? That might just be the wrong question to ask. Maybe historical truth isn't about finding one single literal set of facts. Maybe each story is true in its own way, because it captures a real and important perspective on what justice meant to the people who told and retold it. When you get right down to it, what this whole fascinating puzzle shows us is that a legal system is never just a set of rules on a page. It's not just a cold, logical machine. It's a story. It's the story a nation tells about itself, about its values, its identity, and where it believes its authority really comes from. And that brings us to a final question, one for you to think about. Think about the origin story of your own country's legal system. If we were to rewrite that story today to make it fit our modern values, who are the Jethros? Who are the outside influences or uncomfortable characters we might conveniently forget or airbrush out of the picture? And what would that say about who we are now?